In 1818, John Cleves Sims Jr. issued his Circular No. 1, sending copies to each notable foreign government, reigning prince, legislature, city, college, and philosophical society, quite around the earth. I declare that the earth is hollow and habitable within, containing a number of solid concentric spheres, one within the other, and that it is open at the poles 12 or 16 degrees. I pledge my life in support of this truth, and am ready to explore the hollow, if the world will support and aid me in the undertaking. The fortunes of the idea that the earth was hollow and habitable within, from classical references to the underworld to esoteric and New Age writers today, have been recounted elsewhere, most notably by Walter Cafton Minkle in his 1989. Sims's theories led to a number of fictional visions of the world within, most immediately, Adam Seaborn's 1820 novel, a work which has often been attributed to Sims himself, and the novel with its diagrams and drawings was for some time cited as evidence that the world is hollow. In a somewhat different way, Sims's conviction that there were openings at the poles also led to the establishment of perhaps the most famous American naval scientific expedition, the United States Exploring Expedition, which was commissioned to explore the South Pacific and led to the establishment of a National Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian Institute. The history of the expedition and its origins in Sims' ideas is recounted in William Stanton's 1975. Sims, however, was not the first to argue that the earth was hollow, nor is the first novel set in a hollow earth. There are of course numerous narratives, dating back to Greek and Roman texts, of descents into the underworld, but hypotheses about vast channels or chasms inside the earth appear to be a much more recent idea advanced by some European thinkers in the 17th and 18th centuries as an explanation of volcanoes, whirlpools and the like. This period is filled with a variety of now discarded cosmological hypotheses, many inspired by the attempt to reconcile scriptural accounts of creation with scientific observation, hypotheses about the movement of the sun, the earth and the stars, about the universality of the Great Flood, about creation and the origins of life, and about the Earth's own formation. Among the proponents of now abandoned theories about the composition of our planet was Edmund Halley, better known for the comet which bears his name, who proposed, in a paper explaining the movement of the magnetic poles published in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society in 1692, that the Earth was hollow, that the seemingly solid Earth is actually a shell about 500 miles thick containing 3 smaller concentric spheres. Each sphere separated from the others by about 500 miles of atmosphere. While it is perhaps relatively easy to follow the theories of inner cavities or of a passage between the poles, in writers like Thomas Burnet and Athanasius Kircher in the late 17th century, and to see their relationship to a text like the anonymous 1721, which describes a channel running through the Earth from pole to pole, it is much more difficult to understand how the idea of the hollow Earth emerged as part of Halley's explanation of the motion of the magnetic poles. Even more inexplicable is the depiction of the hollow Earth some 50 years earlier, complete with inner sun and earth, in Ludwig Holberg's 1741 Subterranean Utopia. This is a far greater imaginative leap, for instance, than Jules Verne's well-known account of a descent into the bowels of the Earth through a dormant volcano, 1865. Verne's narrative of the discovery of a vast underworld cavern formed during an earlier geological period seems much more plausible than Holberg's invention of 2 entire inner worlds, one a planet inhabited by intelligent trees, the other the underside of the Earth's crust, as vast as the outer crust on which we live, and populated with a fantastic variety of intelligent life forms. But first published in Latin in 1741, Nicolae Climiae Iter Subterraneum, Novam Telluris Theorem AC Historium Quinti Monarchi ad Huc Nobis Incognita Exhibens, was quickly translated into a number of European languages. The first English edition dates from 1742. As with Verne's, the adventure begins with the descent into a cave, although here the hero falls through a hole into the subterranean world, discovering that the conjectures of those men are right who hold the earth to be hollow, and that within the shell or outward crust there is another lesser globe, and another firmament adorned with lesser sun, stars, and planets. On the central planet, Klim discovers a happy and prosperous utopian land of intelligent, mobile trees. In his subsequent travels around the planet, Klim encounters many bizarre varieties of intelligent trees, and each species forms a separate social grouping. It is these sections of the novel that have earned Klim a place in the history of utopia. But in the final sections of the work, Holberg turns from utopia and social satire to fantasy. Klim is expelled from the utopian land of Portu to the underside of the Earth's crust, which is inhabited by many other fantastic creatures, all of which, plant and animal species alike, are intelligent and gifted with speech, and then he discovers a race of human savages, who, of all the creatures of the subterranean world, alone were barbarous and uncivilized. Klim takes it upon himself to civilize them, and uses his knowledge to manufacture gunpowder and to conquer all of the countries of the firmament, becoming a tyrant, the Alexander of the subterranean world. When his subjects eventually rebel, he is forced into flight and falls into the same hole through which he had previously fallen, thus returning to Norway. Was widely known in the 19th century, the narrator of Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher includes the subterranean voyage of Nicholas Klim among his readings, while the poet Thomas de Quincey began a translation of Klim sometime in the mid-1820s. Giacomo Casanova, better known for his, wrote a lengthy subterranean utopia, 1788, in which he acknowledges the importance of Holberg's novel, while Mary Shelley mentions in her diary that she read Klim as she was writing. Fictional settings inside the Earth can be found throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, from Edgar Allan Poe's Miss Found in a Bottle, 1833, and his unfinished narrative of A. Gordon Pym, 1837, through to Edward Bulwer Lytton's, 1871, Edgar Rice Burroughs' Pellucidar novels, beginning with 1922, and more recently there are authors like Raymond Bernard and William Reed who continue to argue that the Earth is hollow. Born in Bergen, Norway at the time of the Dano-Norwegian monarchy, Ludvig Holberg, 1684–1754, is probably the most European of Scandinavian writers before Ibsen and certainly the best known. He is often referred to as the father of Danish and Norwegian literature. He was a writer, essayist, philosopher, historian and playwright who traveled extensively throughout Europe and is often credited as bringing the Enlightenment to the Nordic countries. In fact, the author of was far better known for his introduction to natural and international law and his theatre. He has been described as the Molière of the North. Like Jonathan Swift's 1726, Klim is a combination of social satire, utopia, and the fantastic. But Swift's shipwrecked narrator is a much more familiar, and plausible, utopian narrative device than is Holberg's imagination of a hollow earth. Holberg never explains who those men, who hold the earth to be hollow are, and none of his critics have been able to identify them. As long as Holberg's sources continue to be a mystery, must be considered the first presentation of the idea of the hollow earth.